I've never shared this with anybody publicly. There's so many things happening in this conversation right now. 1,000 years from now, people are going to be looking at this podcast saying, so this was the breakthrough.
If this was Sports Center, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good.
Yeah, this is my third bottle. So I misunderstood the instructions and the premise of the podcast interview.
The joke I always say is like, how'd you learn so much? Got to drink a lot.
The power of food and beverage to lubricate an environment.
Resistance to change is hurting the church.
I'm not in the camp that God has a penis or a vagina or a body at all. I'm in the camp that God is a universal spirit.
This is the strangest podcast that I've been on. I don't even know what to do.
I'm kind of geeked up about this wine.
You've uncovered the mystery. You've exposed the formula.
You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
We're going to sit down at a table, we're going to have a glass of wine and some food, and we're going to talk about the beauty of Jesus.
Thank you for the hospitality that this particular podcast provides folks like myself, and I know others, to be curious around their faith practices.
I will never forget the first time I bought a bottle of wine by myself, which was yesterday.
If you're familiar with drunk history, I thought it's like drunk theology. So
By the way, drinking this Pinot Grigio at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is making me even more direct in my communication than I normally would be.
Well, hey friends, welcome to episode 16 of Cabernet and Pray. This is a special one. I got to sit down with someone that I have followed from afar for many years and have wanted to meet him, wanted to talk to him, never had the chance, but it all aligned. And episode 16 is Rob Bell. And Rob is a huge name, hugely influential. If you don't know who he is already, which I'm imagining most of you do, if you don't, just Google Rob Bell and you will find out all sorts of things. This guy has had his hand in a lot over the years. Little background, just to prime the pump. At age 28, Rob founded Mars Hill Bible Church in Michigan. And during that time, as he led that, it was one of the fastest growing churches in America. And that's where he kind of got on the map for a lot of people. In 2011, he was profiled in Time magazine as one of their top 100 most influential people. In 2014, Rob was featured on Oprah's Life You Want tour. I mean, you know you've made it when you're on Oprah. He's written numerous New York Times bestsellers, such as What is the Bible?, What We Talk About When We Talk About God, and Love Wins. His most recent book is a fictional story called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? Rob hosts a popular podcast called The Robcast. And these days, he's making art and writing plays and continuing to share great ideas with the rest of us. I absolutely loved this conversation with Rob, loved the chance to not only talk about what I most liked about his recent book, but just his journey and some behind the scenes. And this was incredibly thought-provoking for me. It was encouraging to me, and I hope it will be for you as well. Enjoy episode 16.
Dude, your shirt is...
Piddle, piddle, piddle.
I just don't even know what to say about that. That's so awesome.
Your store is literally so fun. And then, of course, all my kids are like, Dad, what is piddle, piddle, piddle? And I'm like, I don't know how to explain to you what piddle, piddle, piddle is.
No one does.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. Hey man, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
Okay, do you have your honey ginger bee drink?
This one is a spirulina bee pollen, organic wild raspberry lemon that I got from my neighbors. In the morning, I take lemons off my neighbor's tree. What else? A touch of stevia. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie. That looks disgusting. I was thinking it was going to have a more appealing look to it.
Oh, no, you would think this tastes unbelievable. It's actually quite
Really?
sweet. Yeah. You'd be like, this is the best blueberry drink I've ever had. No, you would not. It would, some drinks are like, that's like a backyard in a glass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes some green, like certain kale and cucumber smoothies, I'm like, I'll just go lay face down in your backyard and in, just suck on the ground if I want that taste. No, this would you'd be like, oh yeah, that's great.
It's dark. That's very dark.
I think the wild blueberries do. Oh, you see what I mean?
Okay.
Look at that color. That's just fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. What do you have? What do you have? A Cabernet?
That's the most Rob Bell drink I've ever heard. So I'm doing a rosé, and this is a 2021 Olima rosé from France. Not as exciting as yours, but so I always do tasting notes on these. On this one, I'm getting honeydew melon, rose petal, and pink grapefruit.
Just the fact that you're wearing a Yankees hat as you say that, it's just a lot of worlds are coming together right there.
With a piddle shirt. I mean, we're circling it all.
The whole tableau is just a next level of it. You've just duct taped together a number of things that aren't normally hanging out together, and I'm here for it.
That's true. That's the beauty of life, right?
That's funny.
All right. So for those who are watching and listening, I'm going to just encourage you. Rob just came out with a book that's so fun. And you've said, I've heard you say this numerous times, that you never tire of talking about this book. And I can see why. I mean, there's just so many, it's kind of like my outfit, I guess. There's so many nuances to it. You're pulling together so many things. I'm just going to recommend for fans of this podcast, go get the audiobook version. This is Rob reading it for you. And I mean, dude, it's so fun because you can tell it's just you sitting in your room, wherever. I don't know if you're in the same space you recorded.
The garage right here. It was like here at this desk made out of a door from my daughter's old closet. Like, oh yeah.
So we're here live where the book was recorded audio, and it's just you reading it. And dude, it's so great and it's so fun, and you get your pronunciations on the words that you've made up. So that's helpful to go like, oh, what is Rob envisioning this word sounds like, right? Because otherwise you read it and you're like, I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
Word. Yeah. And it's super fun. So I would just encourage people. That's like the only word I could use to describe it is it's an experience. It's not like you're reading. It's like you're experiencing something with you.
Yeah. And that's really interesting you point that out because right away, like all creation requires a form, and different forms bring with them all sorts of levels of assumptions and expectations. And right away, when I was writing the story, it was like, well, this is a novel, but it was like, just use your own words. It's not really a novel. Because even novel has, I know what a novel was like. No, it's a story. It's a story, and it happens to be taking on these different forms, like a paperback book. And it was really interesting to write the book and then to do the audiobook and almost feel like, oh, the audio is like where it really, as opposed to a book that you made into an audiobook, it's almost like an audiobook that you first wrote down.
Right.
And almost like it's just a story I tell you. Like if you and I were sitting here and I just started telling a 12-hour story. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's very
totally.
Mysterious how, even like you think, like for a parent, like there's this great, some people think the greatest American architect, Louis Kahn, he would ask this question before he began a project by asking, what does this building want to be? So you're like letting it almost like tell you, like an impelling force. It has an energy that comes up within it, and you're just guiding it and sort of in service to it, which I think is, if you have kids, is the greatest question you could ever ask is, who does this kid want to be? Because this kid does not want to be in advanced math. Let's be honest. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're just letting it, as opposed to your own attachments and expectations, you're cramping something and constricting it by placing. So it's interesting you said that about the audio, because I kept listening to like, what does this want to be? What is this? And it was like, oh yeah, just read it so that you can hear the pages turning.
Oh yeah.
Get it like as raw and sort of essential as possible. It's amazing how those sorts of things work.
Well, and then you even say, in the audio version, like, hey, I've left in like the mistakes. So like, like you'd have, if you're a dad reading to your kids, like you stumble over things or you reread it and it's in there. It's, you just don't, you don't hear that in audiobooks.
Right. Cause generally it's seen as a performance, and And especially the first time, because the book continues, there are sections where I like choke up for whatever reason. Sometimes I know why this certain scenes hit me, and other times they just hit at some sort of subconscious deep level. And I remember the first time it happened, I was like, do I just collect myself and do I hit stop? And it was like, wait, stopping recording would be more awkward than just, this is what would happen if I was reading it to you. Right. I would get moved by it, or I would be like, man, I really love this part. You know what I mean? I would just make my own commentary on myself. So just leave it all in.
But that's the experience. We go on that journey with you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so great.
There's the story, and then there's the telling of the story.
Yes.
Which they talk in theater. They talk about theatrical proxemics, or like a comedian. There's what the comedian is doing on the stage, but then there is a second show, which is what is happening in the audience in response to what the comedian is saying. So there's multiple shows happening in the room.
That's so good. Now, how long has this thing been brewing in your head?
Normally things I make, I've been carrying around for a long time. And then eventually it's like, okay, now we're going to make it and put it out. This one, within in the middle of the night, somewhere between fast asleep and wide awake, this guy is asking this guy, where'd you park your spaceship? Almost like a lucid dream. And I remember in the middle of the night being like, this image of this guy asking this guy this question, and immediately being like, well, how does this guy feel about this question? He does not like this question. What's his name? Dill Tud. What's his name? Heen Gru-bare. It was all like right there. So I remember, and there's like a notepad in the clothes closet, like the don't forget the bread sort of notepad, like things you don't want to, your kid needs, whatever. I remember writing down in the morning a bunch of, where'd you park your spaceship? This guy asked this guy, the one guy's name. And then over the, I don't know, a couple days or weeks, I just kept the story just kept coming. And I'd written some other books. So I'd had the experience of when you have enough that you're like, oh, this is a thing. We can start typing. So it wasn't that long before I sat down and started typing out of just the most pure, naked curiosity. What is this? And I right away was like, if I took this to publishers and be like, that's called Where'd You Park Your Spaceship? It's mostly about the planet Furtus. It's like, I've been in, like, there are these rooms in New York City where you go and there's all these people around a table and these executives. I've done that sort of dance before. And I was like, if I like drop that sucker in the middle of one of those tables and like, this is the book, peoples, they'd be like, what? This isn't wait, give us a Rob Bell book. And I had this immediate like, but this is so it was like,
it was the most Rob Bell book
instantly free. And what was so fascinating is instantly it was free from all of the mechanisms, which was fine. All the other books, there's a whole way you're working for 2 years and there's a subtitle on the back cover and there's marketing and promotion. Instantly, this story was like, I'm doing my own thing here. So weird. And I was like, wow, no one may read it. It may never be, this might just be for my own joy, healing, entertainment, who knows? And then you may never make $1 on this. You may actually lose money. It was like right away, it was like, we're here for other reasons. It was really, really fascinating. Especially the trap, of course, is if you go around the world talking about creating things and giving people permission to do what's rising up within them, then when it's like I had to Rob Bell myself. Yeah, it was like I would say humbling, but it was way more intense than just a humbling. It was like, and it had so much energy and joy to it. It was like it just kept saying like, dude, you know nothing. You go around and do workshops on this stuff. You're such a rookie. It was the best.
That's so great. So I had this moment. I thought you might like this. I'm listening to the book. And for those of you, we'll try to keep it relatively spoiler free, but it's not that kind of a book, so it's hard to spoil.
If somebody listening has read the book, could remember a spoiler you and I talked to, like imagine this spoiler. Remember when Bourne's son Lines goes over to Stellan Peak and has to be rescued. And then Heen Gru-bare bites off the tip of his tongue, and a woman named Peebles shuts his. Like, is there somebody who's like, God, you just gave the whole thing away?
I know exactly where it's going now.
You see what I'm saying? Like, oh God, why would I even read?
Fair point. Okay.
Was Ziga May and Lan Xing there?
Yeah.
Might as well just tell me that Bobby Freelance showed up. You know what I mean? That's what I love about it. No one knows.
So I'm listening to this, and Heen is kind of the character you follow along, and Heen's growing up and experiencing this, and gets this moment where he gets a spaceship, and then he's traveling, and then he kind of starts to experience people, and he realizes like, oh, you don't have a spaceship, like you don't get to do the things that I get to do. You're kind of locked in on this planet. And I literally had this thought that I thought, this is a funny thought. I was like, how lame for people who have only been on one planet their whole life. And then I was like, oh, that's all of us. Like in real life, you know what I mean? Like you had like so captured the imagination of, yeah, that's what the cool people do is they travel around in spaceships and they see all these worlds. And then I was like, oh, I felt empathy for the people who, you've only known Furtis, and then I was like, oh, that's literally me. Like I've never been in a spaceship.
That is awesome. Oh my God, that is so great. And oh my God, that is I just have to like take that in. That is such a great take. If this was Sports Center, that would be like such a hot take. Skip Bayless would have no idea. Stephen A. Smith would have no idea what to say if you drop that down. That is so good. And then you think about what you're saying, because page 1, the Earth didn't make it. So our worst fear, the fear of the collective right now, the thing that's hanging in the balance that everybody's like, is the planet going to be okay? The book begins with, yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah, no.
But weirdly enough, that creates the situation that you're talking about. Like, can you imagine just being on one planet? Like something so catastrophic and horrific and devastating. Our 2024 worst fear happens in order to set up a situation where someone like you is going, ugh, only
one planet.
The layers. That's seriously, that's such. What's the opposite of meta? I mean, that's like that is really good. That's really funny. One planet.
Thank you. Anyone who reads this book is going to notice immediately, and if you haven't picked up already, the names are not subtle in this book. We have people like Heen Gru-bare's, Barbara Barbar, Ziga May, Nunye, and my personal favorite, Dill Tud, with the slogan "Piddle Piddle Piddle." For those of you on video, I'm wearing a Piddle 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 shirt. You can get your own shirt if you fall in love with Dill Tud like I did. I got to know, what was your process? What's it like coming up with these characters? I mean, you mentioned you're kind of like laying in bed and Dill Tud came to you. Is that how it was, like a flash of inspiration, or are you literally like rolling these around? Like, what's the most fun name to say? What was kind of the journey behind picking these names?
I love names, like love names. So, one time at a book signing, a guy and his wife said, "Will you please sign our book?" I was like, "Great. Who do you want me to sign it to?" And he said, "Bong and Jaja." Like I'm like, what is it? 10 years? I mean, what's that book came out in 2000? 10 years later, I'm still drafting off just that one. I love names. And I was at the Modern Art Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we went in the stairwell to go up to the next floor. And the stairwell was white walls with black words on the wall, like the size of normal type, filling the stairwell, like multiple stories of just solid words. And I looked closely, and it looked like names, but in I like all kinds of names from like obviously all kinds of different countries. And then there's that plaque right beside the door where the artist explains the piece. And the artist said, "This is a list of all the names of everybody I've met in my lifetime."
Wow.
Just like name wallpaper.
Like,
and I
swear,
that to me is like, I'm with my people. I mean, so a sound, a name. So like in many ways, the name for me is like the portal into the character. And I don't like, I could like literally, because obviously we're working on the new book. I have right here on my phone, like texts. I've texted Rob Bell and there are just like names that I'll come up with, like, and texting to myself. And then there's a list on this other computer right here. Yeah. So they somehow, the name is like the first, it's like the way into who the person is. And then a whole, what they're wearing and where they're from and odd gestures. They scratch a fin, they rub their elbow, like all that sort of stuff that makes a character. It all comes from there. And I don't, some of it I understand and some of it most of it I don't understand why it works the way it does, but it's like really, really, really enjoyable. Like really enjoyable. So I'll meet somebody and they'll say their name, they'll introduce themselves, and I'll literally just repeat their name. Like, I'll you know what I mean? I'll just repeat their name. Like, then I'll say it again, and then I'll ask them like I've met people in the first 5 minutes. I'm just interviewing them about their name because I find it so compelling.
Well, what do they say? Like, one of our favorite things is to hear your own name said, right?
Yeah, and I find it
hearing their name.
Yeah. You know, you meet a guy named Tom and he spells it Thom. What's that guy doing? What kind of maneuvers is that guy trying to pull off?
What are you doing at that age?
Or how about that? What's that name? Sairorse? Saoirse?
Oh, yeah.
Saoirse? Saoirse. Okay. Let's do it. Let's do this. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, so that's and then I right away I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to make up every character's name. And then all of a sudden the guy shows up named Bobby Freelance. I was like, oh, okay. So apparently the pattern isn't make up everybody's name. And there's a guy named Wade, or Randy. So just every once in a while, there's just a guy from Cleveland, like a guy from Ohio name, like a guy who goes to Chipotle name, followed by
carrying a burrito around.
Right. There's just a guy who like loves the Yankees and he bowls on Thursday nights and drives a Corolla, but he's pretty fired up about the new Altima. You know what I mean? Like that guy. So I don't. Yeah. So, and then sometimes just the super straightforward American name. Then those names become wondrous and to me, like, yeah, the weirder the names go, then the more normal they are. Some guy shows up on the planet Lunley and his name is Greg. Now that's just as great. So
what is Greg doing? That's so great. In the book, one of the things I love, you have this theme, and you get into it more as kind of the book progresses, but there's this organization known as the Chairs, which is such a great name. And they control a lot of behind the scenes stuff. I'm curious, where do you see the Chairs most vividly in our world today?
Yeah, what was interesting to me is the way that Heen is taught. The Chairs are like an all-powerful, benevolent structure that's so good you don't even see them. It's almost like they're like the oxygen. They just make the whole thing run so well. And then gradually, obviously, you're like, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
So what I really found interesting exploring was the ambiguity. Are they a totalitarian, ruthless regime that has all these tentacles like him out doing their surveillance? Or is it just like a very loose? Because we don't really ever get much on that. And obviously there's a book 2 and 3 and 4, but I also love the idea that you, the reader, like your question, I love your question because you, the reader, can make up a North Korea level scheming, ruthless scheming, but there's also a great deal of it that you're actually filling in a bunch of spaces. Because Heen we know he has a mechanic. We know Vo is at the training center who sort of gives him the piece from Randy. We know that there's the guy with the mustache and the woman whose lap he wants to crawl in when he's first interviewed. But we don't ever have him telling you anything about people who are like, if you fill this form out, your health insurance will be on page 3. So that's one of the things I really liked is, and even now you realize, I actually would argue that the polarization of America is actually an illusion because it keeps pitting right against left. I actually think it's powerful elites versus everybody.
Oh, everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, if you look historically, that's the real thing. You know what I mean? Like you go, it's Democrat and Republican. No, that's how you would keep people's attention off the real issues. Is convince everybody that it's this side versus this side, and then make healthcare incredibly difficult, and make housing prices in lots of places insane, and just keep everybody. You know what I mean? So in some senses, your question about who are the chairs, in some ways, it feels like that's the question of the day right now. Like, well, you think about, was it 2008, 2.5 million Americans lost their homes because of banking mortgage systems, and no one went to jail or really was penalized in any way who was responsible for that. Like, wait a second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wait a second. So, and people made millions of dollars being paid to do jobs in which they oversaw millions of people losing their homes, which is fascinating. Like, if you want to be a conspiracy person, you don't even have to have conspiracies. It's just like, what happened?
Yeah.
You don't even have to make up anything or like go searching. It's just sitting right there.
And then we tell people it'll trickle down to them, and you're going to benefit indirectly. Right.
And you have now, 40, Ronald Reagan's 1980. You now have the data that wealth is more and more and more in the hands of less and less people. Like, we have massive reams of data now that it trickle down doesn't actually work. Yeah.
And what's fascinating is, when Heen first kind of gets exposed to the chairs, you as the reader are excited for him because, he gets a spaceship and he gets all these cool things and he's meeting cool people. And the first impression is like, wow, this is amazing. And it's only as the story progresses that you go, okay. There's something else going on here.
And I noticed how many people, like in the interviews, have been like, at first I thought it was like a utopia, like you were writing a book about, here's my vision for the world. And then I started to realize, it turns out it's humans. Turns out, which I love when Serpong teaches about exchanges, like all cultures, we make exchanges. Yeah.
I mean, right out of the gate, when you get into the Earth unit, at the beginning of the book, and it was fascinating to dive into, to go, yeah, this is probably where this is going. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And you think about your question about the chairs, like in a number of American cities, right? In Los Angeles, people experiencing homelessness is like a crisis emergency. Like it's so massive. And then you think, there aren't homeless people in Singapore. Like, they just cleaned up the streets. So we could fix these. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Phoenix. You could clean up all the streets, and then you'd have another set of horrors. Let's just get some bulldozers and flatbed trucks and just scoop up all those tents and take those people somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, and then everybody be like, look, the streets are clean. We got our cities back. Yeah. Now we have a different set of horrors.
Right.
So that's that tension, which obviously as the book progresses, Heen is like, wait a second. Obviously I was, apparently the author was maybe making peace with some things.
There's so much though about the human condition in that, this idea of you want to believe it's good. You want to believe there's an easy answer. There's an easy solution.
Right.
Like, just make it feel good. And then you keep going, and it's not that easy. It's not that simple. It's not that clean, you know, and you go, oh, now I have to keep asking the questions, and I'm not going to like what I see. And then what? And then there's one, and the reaction, and you feel that in Heen's journey. Under the chairs.
Yeah. And then like when Dill Tud you find out that Dill Tud's actually got this defiant, like shaking his fist at the man, and he's like, it's an overcorrection. They responded to the trauma of that loss of the earth, and he has this larger and they went the other direction and clamped down. He has this very nuanced course correction understanding that you're like, wait, oh yeah. Isn't that fascinating? It's so interesting to me how you create like these worlds on these planets and these people with these made up names in this other place sometime in some other time. And like the interviews I get to do about this book are all like what we're talking about. Everybody immediately wants to go to 2024, this world, politics, governance, economics.
Well, that's why I think it's so powerful, because you go, it's a space book, and and so that almost implies like, let your imagination go to some far off land, where it's not real. But the conversations in the book are the secret sauce, in my opinion, because that's when you get into all these things, and then it just invites you to, what is that for us, and how, and all of a sudden you're looking at the world, and Heen's job is to notice things, and so you're noticing things in the real world as you experience this book. It's brilliant.
I love it. That's very kind of you. That's cool.
Okay, this is a lighter question, but I'm curious. So Heen's job, Series 5, Nunez's job, Sign 7.
Yeah.
Is there a job with a 6 in it that we're going to meet soon?
What are the people who guide? Is a Section 6? Who are the people who guard these sort of outer boundaries? I think there's Section 6s. There might be a 6. Mm-hmm.
Is there? Because I went back and I literally got the Kindle version, and I Googled the word 6. So I'm like, did I miss the 6? And I didn't find it. No,
because I don't spell words, numbers. I just write the number.
I did. Oh, interesting. I did the number. Google, and I
did you do the number? Huh.
Yeah.
I could swear. Well, then.
I literally thought I must have missed the 6th job. Like, what's the 6th job?
Well, then we'll have to make one up. This is why we make up things.
It's your world, Rob. We're all living in it. Okay, so you have some homework to do. You get to lock down the 6th job.
By the way, one of the joys of this is somebody asked, what was it? They had like a technical question about how something worked economically.
Yeah.
And as they asked it, I was thinking, oh, this is interesting. I could see like almost like Choose Your Adventure. I could, because a part of me, I was like, wait, you probably should just remind them, this is just all made up. Like, it's not like, but as I thought of that, as they were asking the question, I had this other thing like, oh no, Rob, you know exactly what we're going to do here. So they finished their very technical question, and then I just made up a very technical explanation for an answer. And they were like, oh, good. Yeah, that makes sense.
See what I mean? You're like writing notes to yourself later. Like, that's got to be put in there.
Right. Like, this is all just made up.
No, but that's a testament to your ability to create a world that people are mentally living in, right? I mean, this is, I think of like J.K. Rowling answering fan questions about the prettiest. How did Harry, and it's like, none of this is real. But when you go there, you're there, and you want to know, and and I think a great story comes
fascinating. Right. Like when Game of Thrones was sort of had its peak moments, and people were like, Westeros is really in trouble. Like, yeah, and just or like that show Succession, and who do you think will get the company? Who do you think is going to actually succeed him? Which kid? And like, we say that just very straight face. I don't know. Even though they've already written the show, filmed it, and it's sitting in a computer somewhere,
right,
at HBO, we're discussing a made up story that they're going to show us the story they've already told at some point in a couple of months. We're all discussing what's going to happen as if it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, human beings. What in the world?
It was like when the show Lost was big.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd watch it in real time every week and with a group of friends. And then we would all like, what's the deal with the hatch? And what's, and like the codes. And like, we would like go hours and hours. And then you get to the end of it. You're like, you guys didn't answer most of these. You just left us hanging,
And my friend Carlton, who we actually made a couple shows together, he made that show, Carlton Hughes.
Oh, yeah.
And to this, we've done a number of events together. And what was really funny to me, because every time we've done something together, people ask him questions, and everybody asks Lost questions, and it'll always just be he'll just be like straight up, yeah, I have no idea what the deal is with the polar bear.
I love it.
I love when I know he's going to say that. When I would watch the crowd when he would be like, yeah, I don't know, and I just watch people like, wait, you don't know? You're like, yeah, I don't know.
That's so great. It's a good story when you're sucked in. Okay, so in your book, you make bread a surprisingly central part of the story. It's even in the subtitle. Okay, so here's my question: is this a not so subtle connection to Jesus, who referred to himself as the bread of life, or is this something you see in a totally different way?
That never crossed my mind. Huh. No. Well, I mean, no, I don't know. Make it whatever you want. I just like bread. I actually, there's this restaurant down the street from my house here, down the hill. They have this stucco hut out in front that's under this big tree. And in the mornings, Wednesday through Sunday, they have this wooden rack, and they put out these fresh loaves of organic sourdough. And I go down and get a loaf, and something about bread that's like, it's so simple and elemental, and yet good bread is like, it's just so great. It's like when we all talk about what we actually, the moments when we feel most alive, it's generally, there was a sunset, there was coffee, there was a kid running in the grass, we were walking the dog. Do you know what I mean?
A glass of wine.
A glass of wine. Well, it's so funny. Yeah, it's like we generally describe these moments that are so elemental. They're so elegant in their simplicity. I just loved, and then I loved the idea of the story that's all over the place. Heen, and then we find out it was 137, 138 planets he's been to, but then he finds himself in this bakery around this table folding bread there's like 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and the whole big wide broad spatial narrative collapses into this very tight, literally physical space, but then present in that space is love and loss and Borns and his children and Ziga May and Philippe and and I loved the whole universe is like in this bakery with just these few people. And that to me was like a very beautiful thing. You can see the infinite as endlessly outward. You can also see the infinite as you and I having this exchange right now, and the sort of bottomless depth to the interactions that we have. There's an infinity there as well.
Totally. It reminded me when I was a lead pastor, my wife and I we were in Portland, we would take couples out and go wine tasting like on a Saturday. And so we'd spend an afternoon with a couple, get to know them over a few glasses of wine. Incredible experience. I would see them the next day at church, and it was like a completely different person, completely different tone, completely different conversation. And I just noticed that happened so often. I was like, it's the Saturday thing that was real. Like that was real. That, you know, and it's bread and wine, and, you know, it's communion in a very holistic sense, right? Not a sense. I was like, that was where people were being authentic and real. And so I don't, you know, again, I just, as I was experiencing your book, I had overtones of that. Like when Nunez gets to the whole bread speech. I mean, I'm like in my car, like pulled over to the side of the road. Like I have to know what she says next. I mean, it's that, I think, of all of it, is the most gripping part. Like you literally can't push stop in that scene. Like you have to keep going to know, where is this playing out? And I've heard you talk about writing that scene, that it just kind of flowed out of you, but that scene is fascinating. But it invited me to, like, this is what it is. This is something big and beautiful and bringing us all together. And there's like this beauty in it that you bring out through this character. And it's just so good.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting what you're saying about this bread is holy because all bread is holy, because all of life is holy. Like it all is its very own self. And yeah, there's something about the very simple, everyday, like it's almost like your question about the people on Saturday and the people on Sunday is, which one is the temple?
Right.
The one doesn't claim to be, but is. The other claims to be.
Oh, so
and yet,
good.
It's like it's almost like sometimes the most powerful thing is not to name it. The moment you name it and place, come into this space, and the following things are going to happen. The ego construct is already so strong around. It isn't free to be itself because it already has these things that it's supposed to do. Yet the day before, on a Saturday, we're just present to each other, seeing what happens.
Yeah, as soon as you say, this is what this is, right?
The one, yes, the Sunday one says, welcome to the temple. Saturday one says, doesn't even say anything because it just understands the whole earth is a temple.
Just welcome to being alive and present moment.
Right. Isn't that fascinating?
Bread. Sourdough bread. So good. Now, in the audiobook, you can hear yourself cracking up. I mean, there's like, it comes through very easy. And this happens a lot in your podcast where you're like, you have the ability to make yourself laugh. And it's so great. I'm curious, how have you learned to, I would say, like, focus on joy in the midst of a lot of heavy themes you're talking about? So again, this book is not like just fluff. I mean, you're talking about grief and loss and big things, and yet you hear joy in your voice. How have you figured out how to do that? How to focus on
that? Pain. In some ways, I came from a world where you just keep moving, just keep producing, just keep working, just keep hoping. And in some ways, for decades now, learning how to be present to the sadness and disappointment and loss and pain. In some ways, that's been the sort of invitation for me, is to not just, hey, everything's gonna be fine, we're good, but no, it feels very lost. There's a malaise, a void, an abyss, and that always takes you into the absurdity of this experience. Like there's an absurdity at the heart of the human experience. That's why we love comedians. But if you're the love that all of this is happening within, absurdity is the door in. Because if you're still trying to get it to make sense, you're in trouble. Even you asked about Jesus. I think about man owns a vineyard and hires a bunch of people, and they all show up at different times. He pays them the same. It's like people talk about, well, if you were to, die, what would you want on your tombstone? And I'd be like, well, I would just prefer to be scattered in the ocean at my favorite surf break. But if there was a slogan, I would be like, blessed is the one who's in on the joke. You know what I mean? There's an absurdity to all this. Doesn't mean you aren't crying. Doesn't mean you aren't beating your chest. Doesn't mean you aren't sad, lost, angry, confused. That's all actually part of it. It's a necessary part of it. It's almost like if you aren't experiencing that, you're not experiencing the fullness of this experience. But you're on a ball of rock hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour while it rotates at 1,000 miles an hour. What? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People show up at different times. They all get paid the same amount. What? There is an absurdity that you sort of surrender to. And that's actually where you get to the seriousness of this all, is through the absurdity. Like, look at this. Look what we're doing here. Look at you. I mean, anybody who's ever had a kid, you make people? Are you kidding me? They walk around outside your body. Your heart walks around outside your body. So I think in some ways I think I came, when you're younger, you tend to take it quite seriously. Am I any good? You want to make your mark. You want to have a purpose. It's great. Fine. You want to change the world. I used to say I want to change the world with a straight face. And then you just get wrecked enough that you realize there's a different curriculum. And perhaps that's where you actually, it's like, think about the people who have shaped you the most. They probably weren't like, Jeremy, you better, you should, you don't, you gotta, you're gonna, they were probably had a wink. Yeah, man. Yeah, Jeremy, it's good to be you. Yeah, you're playing that one out. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lightness
on
the other side of the heaviness. You push through the heaviness. And I think that's how it works. I think that's how it's worked for me. So sometimes I'm in my garage recording a podcast laughing. I'm laughing at the absurdity of lots of it. And weirdly enough, that's how I get to my heart. And maybe other people's as well.
The thing that I would say was probably the most moving part of the story for me was, and I'll kind of put this in my words, I feel like Heen gets to a point, he realizes he's good at something that he no longer wants.
Right.
And that struck such a chord with me because I spent 2 decades in church ministry, and I felt like I was good at it. I had built the resume, I had the experience, I had all that. And then I got to a point where I don't want to do this anymore. And there's like a loss, there's a confusion, there's grief, all this. And Heen, I think, gets to that moment. And I'm telling you, when I got to that part of the book, it was like this, like, whoa, like heaviness of like, this is your story too. This is you growing up one thing and then realizing I don't want to do this anymore. I don't really know the question behind that other than you have modeled this. You've gone from such different worlds. You've gone from the rock star pastor that everyone's trying to emulate, and look how fast this church is growing, to, a very different version of Rob Bell today. The artist and the author and all of this. And I was even thinking of like John Piper saying, "Farewell, Rob Bell." Is that same moment, right? Of like, you're good at something and you're leaving that behind. Like, I don't know. Can you let us in on like any of that feeling for you? It's obviously coming out in this character, but
yeah. So at one point in your life, at one point for a person developmentally, wait, you're telling me there's something I could work at and get good at? I could get better at it, and it is like helps people. And wait, I would call it the triple. And I might get paid for it. What a win! That'd be incredible. And then at another moment, I'm good at it and it helps people, and I get paid for it. might be the worst reason to do it because it cuts you off from what's happening now, your heart. And most people know divorces, but not graduations. Like, so imagine your friend who's like, hey, I'm done. I left working at such and such place. Notice our reflective scandal, right? Someone either got fired, scandal, some failure of some sort. Notice for how many people they hear about an ending and it's instantly, okay, what really happened?
Right.
As opposed to, why'd you leave? Because it was good.
Hmm.
That was a great season. And I've asked, I'll ask a crowd, how many of you, relationship, town, job, something, stayed too long? Like every hand at some point in your life, every hand goes up. How many of you, there was a moment when it was time to be done and you held on because of comfort, stability, etc.? I do these sessions here in Ojai once a month. People sit under these trees for 2 days with me. And if you could see person after person, they sit across from me and we do this work where we watch them find clarity. But how many people are, oh, I'm done. And there's this really interesting myth of expertise, which is, well, I've been doing this and I gained these certain skills. So obviously the next thing I do will have to take all of these skills and transfer them over into the next thing.
Right.
Which actually is rooted in such a deep conditioning around productivity. Like, but I have spent all these years doing this. I don't want that to go to waste. Wait. But you did it. Like you did that for 20 years. That's what those skills were for. Maybe they carry over, but like, yeah, you did that. Now you're doing this. So you see how deep the conditioning is around everything I've done has to show how it was worthwhile and productive very clearly, or it was a waste. Is that, talk about, it's like the Industrial Revolution run wild in your mind. Like that's the inner capitalist. Everything has to produce a thing infinitely into the future, as opposed to, man, that was a good run. That was what a great chapter. Now let's try something else. Or even that thing about you find something and then that's what you do year after year after year, forever in a particular direction, which is lovely. There are people who do that. I think it's great. Wonderful. For other people, I did this for a while. I was following something. Then it led me here. So I left that and then I did this for a while. And then it took me over here. And the number of people I work with who like feel bad because they're like, and then I did this, then I went to culinary school, then I was a travel agent, and they're like, I've just been all over the place. And I will always just say, hold on, take a deep breath. You know what that sounds like? And they're always like, what? Pretty great life. Sounds really interesting. Where did it, but it never amounted to anything. Well, you just said it's been quite an adventure. What, there's something, like a building named after you? What do you mean didn't amount? Do you see what I mean? Like how much of this is actually just an ego construct that it's like a desperate desire to sort of freeze it in time, as opposed to a lot of times Kristen and I don't know what we're following. Just following something. And you're just organizing your life around it because that's where the life is at. And we'll know it when we see it.
And I would just say, watching you, I mean, it feels like you're always 10 years ahead of the rest of us. You know, like the things you're thinking about, it's like 10 years from now. And, you know, even like when you wrote Love Wins, I wasn't there yet theologically on that. And I remember reading it and I'm like, you know, I wasn't bothered by it, but I'm like, yeah, I can't get there yet. And now I am. And I look back and I go, what was my issue? You know, but it was like, I wasn't there yet, you know? And I think I'm like, oh, Rob's just ahead. Like you get there. But I'm curious, is there an emotional weight of that? I mean, we laughed about the Piper line, but like, did that hurt? Like being the kind of on the early cusp of always being on the edge of that, or is that part of the grief of your journey?
For sure. Like in my late 20s and 30s, what those have been literally 15, 20 years ago, Love Wins was 2011. Part of that was like, wait a second, I'm not playing this game. That's what happened to me with that book, is the people who didn't like that book was like, oh, wait, I'm not playing this game. I'm not trying to prove that I'm whatever, Bible enough or something. So part of that, part of it was I wasn't playing that game. So somebody going, this isn't orthodox enough. Well, yeah, that wasn't a squad goal of mine. So there was some of that. Some of that was just basic. Yeah, like lots and lots of people saying really bonkers things has like, yeah, that's like a weird sort of stab in the heart. Like, what? It's almost like, wait, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with your tradition. Like, this is nothing new. Yeah, and part of it was, I do remember distinctly, was like, okay, now I'm done.
Really? That was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna go do something else. Yeah. Part of it was like, it was some sort of like gift of like, you were playing something out in this container, and now we're done. Yeah, it was like an end of a chapter. It was like a very distinct end of a chapter. It's interesting to think about that, and I haven't thought about that in a while.
What's the dominant emotion you felt in that?
Well, the interesting thing is it started, God, it's going way back. I remember it started early on. I started talking about women's equality like 2001. And then there was a group of people who organized to have me removed from the church that I started, which was like, wait, what? So there was like an absurdity to that, which was like, and then there was spirituality and ecology and any vision for the world that doesn't begin with the earth itself. Like, you can't, what are you doing? And then I remember there was some Christmas sermons protesting the war in Iraq, which apparently wasn't what people wanted to hear at Christmas, specifically families who had children who weren't going to be home at Christmas because they were fighting in Iraq. So talking about the U.S. industrial military complex wasn't their idea of like a Christmas series. So I think your question goes back 10 years before that, and I was just following something, and so it's like almost like playing a different game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wait, well, if you pull that thread, it brings you here, and then if you pull that, it brings you here, and so people having a problem with that, or the was almost like a, wait, I'm not trying to build a fortress and then protect it. We're out here exploring. So the emotion, like your question about the emotion, was more like, wait, what's going on here? Like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm fuzzy on where we're missing each other. I don't know. That's hard. It's so long ago. But most of all, it was a very personal exploration, and everything just kept getting more interesting, more beautiful, more hopeful, more real. That's what it felt like. And there was always people who were like, oh my God, me too. I totally get. Yeah. So
that's what I was going to say. I think for the rest of us watching you have modeled that in such a beautiful way. And, you know, I just watch you and I go, that has to take a toll on you. You know, it has to be when you're out in front, you're the first one kind of experiencing that. But you give guys like me freedom to go, I don't have to keep doing that. I don't have to, you know, I can reinvent. I can dream.
Absolutely.
I can explore. And even you writing this book, it's not a Rob Bell book. You know, it's like, who cares? And it's just like but you're giving us freedom to say, like, you don't have to be who you were. Like, you can be the next version of you. And it
just feel like death. It just feels like a straitjacket or something. To, yeah. Oof. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, there's a certain art. It's not blinders. I'm trying to think what the word is. There's a thing you're doing. So no matter how painful or confusing or like, wait, so-and-so said they're boycotting. Wait, what? I remember people would say things like, did you hear that such and such, whatever organization is boycotting you? And I'd be like, is that something I'm part of that I don't know? Like, I wasn't ever aware that I was they're questioning you or whatever. And I would just always be like, wait, was I ever that? I'm not sure. What even is? I just, so I think part of it is, it's always about new creation. So you and your wife are with this couple at a vineyard on a Saturday, having this profound connecting experience with other humans, this other couple. It's like something within you goes, that's what I'm here for. So as opposed to, I don't want to be a part of that thing. No, this is this table. This is the table. So for a lot of people, who are very upset with where they're coming from, it's almost like they're looking backwards at the thing they're coming from or out of, as opposed to new creation, which is it's like, what do you want to do? What's next? What do you want to create?
Love it.
What do you want to make? Let's get real quiet. Forgive who you got to forgive. Grieve whatever you got to grieve. Now, what do you want to do? Got an idea?
Let's laugh about it.
You're going to go to school? You're going to start a business? You're going to get a new job? You're going to landscape your backyard? I don't know. What is it? And in my experience, and it was just earlier this week, a group of people here in Ohio, and just watching person after person literally making a new world. Like artists, activists, entrepreneurs, just with ideas and like, I think I'm going to try this next. Sounds fantastic.
Love it.
It's a very calm, centered. What do you want to do?
All right, last question, Rob.
I love it.
What is something that is blowing your mind right now?
My daughter just discovered literature. She's in an honors English class, freshman in high school, and discovered like reading a text, like reading great literature, and then the layers and subtleties of depth and nuance and interpretation. And they just did To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was just saying to her, have we been talking about this every night? She's got 2 papers a week, and watching her like get into the story, and then the teacher is a master at getting these prompts that force her to like really reflect on what's happening in the story. And then just a couple nights ago, she was showing me, I don't even know what year it was, 1940-ish, the Gregory Peck black and white film of To Kill a Mockingbird. And my daughter, who has the world on her phone, Violet's like, check this out. Look at this scene. Okay, look at the scene. Look at it. It's even she's like absolutely enraptured with the very simple black and white shooting of it. And she loves the crafting of sentences. And like, so I now like each evening, I'm like, oh, at any moment now, she's going to be like, hey, can we do some stuff? Can we work? Can we work a little bit? Can I bounce some ideas off you? Just blowing my mind.
That's so cool.
Yesterday, she's like, guess what we're starting now? I was like, what? She's like, Romeo and Juliet. The teacher assigned characters to different people, and then we read it out loud in class.
Wow.
And she's like, who wants to be Romeo? And she's like, this guy who she's always telling me about stories, he's like, I'll be Romeo. And she's like, he went for it. You know, love the dude. The first day of Romeo and Juliet, you're 14. The teacher says, who wants to read the Romeo part? And there's a guy who's like, I'm in.
Obviously me.
The best. Just the best.
That's so great.
She just, yesterday or 2 days ago, which is why I had to change this time. She's like, I got us Dune Part 2 tickets.
Oh, nice.
So she and I are about to go have a Dune experience. So excited.
Well, Rob, seriously, thank you for taking the time to talk.
I loved it. Thank you for having me on.
Seriously, just, having watched you literally for decades from afar and read your work, I mean, wildly influential in my own life and my own thinking. You're a phenomenal communicator. You live what you talk about. And it's been so fun to explore that in your latest book. It's been fun to explore it with you in person. And I'm stoked for more people to be exposed to this book and to these ideas and to go on their own journey of new creations. So thank you, friend, for all this.
Oh, man. I'm so glad we met. This is great.
Thanks for joining us for Cabernet and Pray. We'd love to hear what you thought of today's episode or what you'd like to see more of in the future. You can email us at cheers@communionwineco.com. And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us online at communionwineco.com.